My name is Brian Keevan. I am president of wholesale at AmeriLife out of Clearwater, Florida. And my role is the pleasure of supporting those agencies that we work with, making sure that they're able to sustain and grow. So I'm an agent advocate, an agent at heart. I started as an agent and always believe that. And I know this panel is the same. So on that note, you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brian. I am Andrew Soul. I am the loan carrier rep up here, sales director with Physicians Mutual.
Hi, Angela Palo. I'm the COO of Pinnacle Financial Services. We're a national FMO located in Pennsylvania.
I'm Danielle Roberts, Boomer Benefits out of Fort Worth, Texas, as an independent agency, and I am also the Medicare Advisory Working Group Chairman for the National Association of Benefits and Insurance Professionals.
And I'm Dwayne McFerrin. I'm with Senior Market Sales out of sunny Omaha, Nebraska.
Steve Pettit with AmeriLife in this senior business for the past 33 years.
All right, so we're just going to have a conversation up here and just talk about kind of what's going on and what we're seeing. People that are living it every single day. So, Steve, just before we get going, what's the landscape of med sub? We're talking about everyone's talking about med sub this, med sub that. So, what are you seeing out there? Because you're one of the most passionate. I mean, this group is the most passionate about med sub I'll ever find. So, please, why med sub?
Did you see Angela laugh? That's an understatement, right? Yeah. So, no, I think it's a great time to be in the senior business. I think we all hear the numbers: 65 million people at seniors in this space. We all hear the big number: Medicare Advantage, 32 million of those, 31, whatever we're calling it today. But I think there's always been at least 20 to 25% of the market has had Medicare supplement. Before Medicare Advantage existed in 1999, there was 23.5% of the population had a Medicare supplement. It still has stayed between 20 and 25% or 24% for the last several years that Medicare Advantage existed. So there's a great opportunity. 14 million people believe in that product. And then there's another 18 million people that have just original Medicare. There's opportunities there. So I think it's a great time to be in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just background on me, I sold my first med sub, my first Medicare Advantage, though it was not Medicare Advantage, and it was called Medicare Risk. Try selling that product, right? Uh, I sold my first policies in 1995. You mean I can sell this med sub? I got to get a premium on, or I can give this other product away. I mean, back at the beginning, those MA, you had to overcome zero, right? They couldn't believe it. But med sub, in my mind, is still critical. I think it's held its own. It's still in a place. So there's some definite headwinds. There's headwinds for MA and med sub. So Dwayne, let me start with you. Right? I hear there's a lot going on up in DC lately and in the States. You want to, you've been up to DC a couple times, right?
Yeah, in fact, I'll be there on Monday and Tuesday this week. For the med sup industry, one of the things that's changed is it used to be that someone would get their procedures taken care of before they retired, right? When they were at work, they would take advantage of those group benefits. So one of the new things that are happening are people with a high deductible and high premium, they're putting off those procedures until they go into Medicare. So now you have a turning 65 individual that's actually ready to go in and seek treatment, whereas historically on an open enrollment basis, that was a pretty healthy book of business for a carrier to take on, and they would take as much turning 65 business as they could get. And that's changed. And on top of that, we had the pandemic that hit. And with the pandemic, many people put off procedures. But since the pandemic has been over, 3 years? And yet we still have heightened morbidity. We have morbidity in the 20% plus range. In fact, this week, a carrier announced a 30% rate increase in one state and a 40% rate increase in another. And we're seeing that in a lot of states where those rate increases are going up. And one of the issues has been the birthday rule. The birthday rule is marching its way state to state. It used to only be in blue states, but now it's finding its way to red states. Now, the state of Nebraska just defeated the birthday rule.
Dwayne, how would you describe the birthday rule? Does it mean they're going to send me a present on my birthday if I'm a member?
You are not on my birthday list. but many of you in this room are. And so the birthday rule, the way that works is once a year, the month of your birthday, you would be able to switch plans from one Medicare supplement or from a Medicare Advantage plan into a Medicare supplement without underwriting. Now, some states differ in their definition. Some go on policy anniversary and some are just within the same carrier. But the birthday rule essentially is a consumer right to switch plans on a guarantee issue basis. But that's affecting pricing. So the other things I mentioned are affecting pricing. So we are in a little bit of a challenge. In fact, the most challenge we've had since Medicare Plus Choice, when those plans went out and really failed in the late 90s, you called Medicare risk, but same idea. These forerunners to Medicare Advantage, when they failed, consumers were allowed to go guarantee issue. And then the Medicare supplement industry was kind of flat on its back for about 3 years, trying to recover from all of that anti-selection. So there's headwinds that are affecting consumers. So as I look at it, it's not just do we defeat, proposed regulation, but what do you do as a producer, realizing that you're in the middle of change? And so I think of most of you would sell Plan G. That's your go-to product. But I think it's time for us to get a little more creative. So I did form a group, not an association, but a group of carriers and distributors and also associations to say, what do we do with Medicare supplement? What's the right thing to do? Because we want to make sure that consumer choice continues, the ability to go to any provider that you want, that as long as they accept Medicare, and that you're not somehow forcing someone into a Medicare Advantage HMO plan, which they really don't want. And so one of the suggestions that's come out of this group is that perhaps we should be asking for some kind of the ability to have a premium surcharge for someone that exercises a guaranteed issue right, giving the carrier the ability to charge just a little more so that everyone else doesn't pay for it. Can we find a way to keep the premium down? Other ideas would be, should we spend more time on N? Should we be spending more time on high deductible G, pairing that with a hospital indemnity plan and giving more consumer choice? But G itself, many of you, I'm sure, are facing the challenge between commission reduction with guarantee issue and the affordability of the client. We really need to start thinking different for Medicare supplement, and that may mean changing plans, but also changing how we give advice.
And I think we really want to keep the agent a part of this. As you said, there's pressures on commissions, and things like that. So just really quick, I mean, when Steve and I put this panel together, we really wanted to go after, those that were big advocates in the industry. So, Danielle, with everything going on, you're hearing stuff in the States, you're hearing stuff at DC, and everything that Dwayne, talked about. I mean, it sounds like, are we at a point where things got to change? And what are you hearing out there? What are they talking about out there? They being, the powers that be, the legislators and those that can influence or change this.
One of the things we saw in the Wyden report that came out earlier this week was some recognition from them about the Inflation Reduction Act having negative consequences. And I'm sure all of you are hearing the same thing from your clients. They're concerned premiums went up about 24%. That's with the premium stabilization. And so another challenge that we have in this market is if those Part D plans go through the roof, can we still sell Medigap? I have in my own agency been just giving full disclosure. So if I have a webinar or I'm doing a sales training for my agents that are on the phone, we're telling them to let these people know up front, hey, you're probably going to be facing a 10 to 15% rate increase every year on a Medigap plan. And that may affect which plan is going to be right for you. So if we look at a premium for a Plan G, if you were to get a 15% rate increase every year, could you sustain that if you couldn't switch plans? And if you can't, then maybe we need to look at a Plan N or sometimes some more creative combinations for those things. The big thing we have to get across in Washington, D.C. is that when they make rules like the Inflation Reduction Act, they don't actually want to kill Medigap, but they aren't thinking through all of those things. And so it takes a lot of voices, I think, for all of us to be making those comments, coming to CapCon for NABIP in February, meeting with the legislators, and making sure that they know some of those things. You can interview your own clients and find out what some of their concerns about that are. And you can meet with your legislators in your hometown. They're usually at home during the summertime. And we need to be putting that message out there that if we aren't careful to get those Part D premiums under control, and we don't have enough carriers in the Part D market, then we are going to see Medigap slowly die. I think we're down to 7 national carriers. I mean, down from 25 something.
43 in
At the very beginning.
2005. Yeah,
Yeah.
43. Now we're down to 7.
And there's something as too much choice, but now with Part D, we're getting down to too few choices, and we need to have sustainability for that program if Medigap is going to survive for the long term.
Yeah, and it's really you know, the Part D really has a big deal because it really is part of the full package, right? Angela, what are you hearing? I mean, you go to a lot of these Part D meetings with these carriers, right? I mean, is Part D going to survive? I mean,
It may survive. It may be a product where you can expect lower commissions, but one of the things that I'd like to bring up, we're trying to train our agents. We really believe MedSup is still and will always be viable. But a year ago, you would turn on your computer and there would be 5 new carriers, and the premiums would be $10 versus $90. We're trying to get the agents into the mindset that if you want this to be a sustainable product, don't just sell on premium. Look at the history of the company. How many years have they been in the business? What's their history of rate increases? To Danielle's point, be frank. Hey, this is a product that used to have very small increases, but like your car insurance, like your life insurance, like other products, expected to be maybe 10, maybe 12. Explain what's going on with the Part D and just be honest. This year, I thought this was a revelation for us. We have a lot of committed MedSup agents, and every day I'm getting, and I won't say the carrier's name, I'm getting lists of Part D products that our agents were selling without commissions. And we started just like survey because we're in every state, we have every company, right? So we just started to survey the agents and we're like, why are you selling that? Because it's the best thing to do, and I want to sell the MedSup. So I think that the agents are really the backbone of the MedSup survival plan. And I think that I can say for our distribution, I'm really proud of the way that they've analyzed this. They've stopped going after the lowest premium. They're really selling the most appropriate product for their client. And again, we're like telling people, if you have a client that's coming out of a carrier product, they probably have an HMO. What's wrong with the N? And it's a lot easier to say to somebody, just like when you had your insurance at your company, this is a plan N, it's going to work the same way. So we have not heard promising things from the carriers.
what would you say, and this for the panel too, you hear a lot about the agents jam people into plans because they're paid more. Is that a good strategy?
I don't believe that. And I think
Why not? Why don't
because
you
what I just told you, we sold so much Part D this year on plans that the agents knew they got no commissions. If all the agent cared about was commission, they would have never sold it.
It seems it's in the best interest of the agent and the consumer to get the consumer on the best plan.
When we had our meeting with MedPAC last week after a dismal committee hearing, which was completely anti-agent, we were grateful that they would meet with us.
By the way, these guys need to know about this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things we shared with them is they're not leaving Medigap plans. It's not that we're steering them into Medicare Advantage plans. It's that they're hit from every angle with, here's this great zero premium plan and everything in it's going to be free. And tomorrow, if you join, there'll be a pink Cadillac in your driveway. That's what we're up against in the industry. And so even some of the longtime Medigap policyholders that have been with us for a while, sometimes will call in and say, it's just getting too good to pass up. And so they need to have a better understanding about the steering that happens because of the way those plans are built. It's pretty hard for somebody living on a fixed income to turn down something that is free or has a premium give back and also has dental, vision, and hearing. They aren't thinking about that someday they might have a skilled nursing facility need and that there's issues with prior authorizations. They're living in that moment, and we really need to get that message across to legislators and think tanks that are informing CMS and legislators, because we're not the problem.
And we're going to talk about some recommendations on how. Before we get to that, I want to give Andrew a chance. Like as a kid, it's about time, right? He's a carrier. We don't have to, So. He agreed. He agreed. What are you guys hearing? I mean, obviously we're in this together. And that's one thing I really want and to get across. We don't do this. I mean, and so are the providers, the carriers. A lot of this is even coming from the providers. I'd love to hear your opinion on that, Steve. Come back to that because it's, man, you really sold me, Danielle. There's zero premium plans. Wayne's telling me rates are going up. Part D's going up. I'm excited about selling MedSup, right? So you're really selling me. So why should we still care about MedSup? I mean, I think it's important to you, right?
Yeah, yeah. MedSup's my first love. It's Medigap, right? Well, my wife is my first love. Medigap's in there though. Yeah. So why sell Medigap? Because it's the most comprehensive coverage that your client can have. There's so few restrictions on it and there's so little red tape. And my favorite thing as an agent selling Medigap was knowing on the back end how little I had to contribute because I could trust that the plan would do what it said it would do. Didn't have to worry about denials of care. I didn't have to worry about AI deciding whether I could stay another night in a skilled nursing care facility. So as a carrier rep, Medigap, and at least the agents that are selling it with us, Medigap has given a sense of safety, like a safety net that they can depend on. And since Medigap has been that way since its existence, since its creation, you can depend on it to go through that for the rest of the lifetime of the policy, right? Now, birthday rules aren't sexy. It's not a sexy thing for a Medigap carrier to take on. I do see why a birthday rule was created. I do understand that.
So why do you think that?
Yeah.
Why do you think it was created?
Well, you got someone who's 80 paying $500 a month for a plan F or a plan G, and they're having to decide between paying that premium or having no coverage, and they're going through cancer treatment. I understand. And in fact, in some cases, birthday rule doesn't seem like a bad thing when you got states like Illinois and Louisiana right now, that it's a birthday rule within the carrier's block of business. I think that makes sense. It limits these carriers from coming out with 40% rate increases.
So I get a big rate increase in Illinois. I can't go if I'm with, say, plan carrier A.
Sure.
I can move within that, and they retain all that risk and all those claims, right? They can't offload it, and then I go to somebody else and they pick it all up.
And that's the genius of what I think makes sense with the birthday or anniversary rule. Keep it within the carrier, make it the carrier's problem. Don't make it Medigap's problem.
So, Steve, talk to me a little bit about the ecosystem. So a little bit about your background, right? You and I worked together at Aetna, and now we came over to the distribution side. And if you notice, we're both a lot happier, right? No offense to our carrier friends, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just said he loves me. I thought he loved his wife and MedSup, and now he's, you're stretching your luck here. But talk about the ecosystem, right? Because Andrew talked about and touched upon the carriers, but you got the providers. I think one of the things going on MedSup too is I think the providers are for it, right? But they may be driving it or pushing it a little too far. What's the ecosystem? And when I say ecosystem, who all matters in MedSup? You got us, the distribution. You got the carriers, right? You got the providers. You got CMS. You got the states, right? You got all of this, right? Any thoughts on how we could all get along and where this might be going? I mean, is there ever going to be a balance there, or is it just going to be a nonstop forever fight?
Well, I think one of the things we have to focus on up front is we've all seen the Senate finance reports, the pressure, the birthday rules. We're talking about a lot of things.
By the way, new birthday rule, Dwayne has to give me 2 presents every year.
Two presents, all right. So there's a lot of things going on out there. And then we look at the year-end results and we see the losses on not just Medicare Supplement, on Medicare Advantage as well.
Why do we care about that? We're distribution. We just want to get paid commission. We don't care about losses.
Well, it matters. So when Medicare is struggling like they are, and they're seeing higher claims for themselves, because don't forget, when the higher claims go to the Medicare supplements, who else gets them first? That's Medicare themselves. So I think we've got to figure out how to make this all come together. And it's very hard for actuaries. When you think about home offices, there's actuaries looking at these things. It's hard for them to predict the volumes of business when other things are influencing them. If they're just seeing 10 people and traditionally 5 of them take this or 2 of them take that or whatever that is, they can predict it. But when other things influence that, whether it's GI or whether it's amount of compensation per plan, that gets difficult to predict. So I think it's important that we continue to work with carriers and states, and we make sure whatever regulations and whatever rules we put in place is healthy for Medicare as a whole, no matter which one we're selling.
Yeah. Anybody else comments on that? Thoughts? No? So, all right. So then,
Hey, I do have
yeah,
a comment.
yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that you just said, Danielle mentioned, Dwayne mentioned, I think that the agents over the last 3 years have really gotten much more involved in the regulatory environment with some of the industry groups.
Yeah,
It's
which,
really
yeah.
critical that your voices are heard.
So Angela, before you do that, you're taking us to the next topic. So you start us off. What can these guys? I mean, what should they do? I mean, should they? How do they find out about this stuff? How do they stay informed? How can they share their voice? What would you're a huge advocate. What would you recommend or share or advocate them to do?
So what we do, and I probably Dwayne does the same thing, and probably Danielle does too. When everything goes on, we always try and push the message out to the agents. We do webinars, we have pages devoted to it on our website. We have call campaigns, and we try and get you involved because it can't just be our voice. I responded to a comment the other week on LinkedIn about churning. Well, if the agents would stop churning, are the agents churning? Or are the agents making decisions because a plan got suppressed or providers jumped out of the network or the Part D got too expensive? But people have to hear your voice. And it's really critical that we stand up as an industry and be heard. And we have to differentiate ourselves and let the people that are making the decisions for you know you sit down, you talk to your clients, you're selling what's in their best interest. I think that's really what we need to really focus on. Losing my voice. Second panel today.
Any thoughts from you guys? Any thoughts on what they can do? And I think you might want to even talk a little bit more about what you are actually doing. You said you're going to DC next week, Danielle. You're the chair of I think it was a chair of a tell them what you're doing and maybe some thoughts on what they could do because again I'll talk you guys up. I mean these guys are real agent advocates and they're out there fighting. I mean put the companies they work for aside, right, is what they really do. And they focus on, keeping the agent a part of the enrollment process, a part of the industry, a part of servicing the client. So would you just talk a little bit about what you're doing a little bit more and what they could do?
So earlier this spring, we didn't have the new administration, all the political appointees in place, including Dr. Oz. Well, Dr. Oz is supposed to be confirmed this week. So that's why I'm going to DC Monday and Tuesday, right? I'll be meeting with Energy and Commerce key staffers, House Ways and Means, Senate Finance, the Help Committee, which is Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Talking to those that make the regulations and the legislation to at least tell our story.
Wait a second, Dwayne. Why don't I just go talk to Medicare?
Well, one time in the opening session, you might have heard me say that yesterday, is I called CMS and I said, I have a lot of great ideas. I think I could really help. And they stopped me and said, we're your regulator. We tell you what to do. We don't want your input. Wow. So that means we have to go around. And so we go to committees, Congress, we go to research companies that provide input like Paragon and Commonwealth and MedPAC that Danielle mentioned. We need to have influence in other ways. Talk to elected officials, tell stories. Those surveys that we talked about yesterday, very important, right? Tell our story really well. So that's really about all of us. So I'd encourage you, whether you're a member of NABIP or NAFA or CIAB or any other association is you need to represent your clients and you need to tell your story. And if you're relying on someone like me to do your heavy lifting, you're making a mistake. Is all of us need to be advocating for our clients as long as you're talking about your client. But as soon as you start talking about your commission, then they turn you off really fast. So always use the lens of the customer. And if you do that, you are representing your clients. And so that just would be my advice is get involved, talk to your elected officials, be active in your state, but always talk about your clients and the impact of these changes and how it affects your clients.
Yeah, and I've been grilled by CMS many times, and been able to join the likes of you and others on a lot. And you're so right. I mean, I don't think people understand you don't get an audience with CMS, and even when you do, it's not worth your time. They humor you at the very. In fact, if anything, you're doing yourself. They're looking for other things when they meet with you, not to solve your problems. They're trying to see what else you're up to. In fact, when I met with them, I've had a similar experience to Dwayne. We're your regulator. We tell you what to do, and oh, by the way, it's our money, right? We'll do what we want with it. So, and all they care about, and I want to reinforce something Dwayne says. All that CMS cares about is the beneficiary, which by the way, so do we. So it's not that crazy, right? So Daniel, what are you tell them what you're doing and again, why should they get involved? Why should they care?
One of the things that I do is I have a Google alert set up for the word Medicare. And so I get an email every day with all the top news articles about Medicare. And often you'll find some in there that could use an agent's perspective. You can scroll to the bottom and you can give a comment. I also sometimes reach out to the reporter. I've ended up having a number of TV spots just by putting my name out there. So that's one way for you to participate in just sort of the national conversation that's happening. But as I'm up here, I will always make the plug for joining an association because at NABIP, we put together all the sound bites for you. We have beautiful templates that you can use to go and talk with your legislators. And now that we have the surveys going, I can use the Texas one, which has constituents giving their opinion of their agent's help. And these are people that are in Texas. So then if I go to Ted Cruz's office, I'm going to be able to say, here's constituents showing what we do as agents. How can we make our voice louder? Any money that you have in dues, it just pales in comparison to the impact that we can have, especially with a new CEO at NABIP who's really turning things around. I can feel the momentum coming behind that. We'd love to have you get involved. You don't have to have a local chapter to be involved in NABIP. You can just get in on the national conversation. There's great conferences that we go to. We go to the Hill. We talk to some really important people. We met with Senate Finance Committee when we were there this last time. So that type of activity is really important to them, hearing our voice, and it has to get louder because I have heard from multiple agents during this conference with questions like, are we even going to still have a job in 5 years? It feels like the hits are coming from everywhere. So we have to amplify that voice. Amanda put together a luncheon today where some of the top execs were all meeting about how can we get together to work on this problem. And if everybody here were to join the organization or show up at CapCon, we would be able to make a lot bigger difference than you think. Every little bit matters. They need to be hearing as much from us as they are from those consumers that had a bad experience. And that doesn't happen if every single person doesn't get involved.
So what do you say? Will we have a job in 5 years?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, yes, I think so. Yeah, look, the panel's been loud and clear. Angela, what would you say to somebody who hasn't joined anything yet or has joined something but really hasn't engaged? What would you say to them? Your experience with getting involved. What's that been like?
So we've been involved with NABIP for probably 10 years now. And initially, I'll be very frank with you, we did it as a recruiting tool. We saw Dwayne and he was everywhere with NABIP and we're like, SMS is growing. We need to do that. So that was really why we joined. And then we started to listen and then we took advantage of opportunities. The first time I went to CapCon and got to go and sit in these meetings and meet these people, it was like, wow, that's how I get paid. That's my livelihood, man. I need to take this seriously. And then we really started to promote it, not as a way for us to recruit agents, but as a way for our agents to recruit help for themselves.
So it sounds like instead of asking, and Danielle, back to you too, or Angela, instead of asking, will I have a job? How do I make sure
Exactly.
I have a job, right?
Exactly. And I think this is interesting. When Final Rule last year, we had thousands of agent comments. And when they came back, they actually said in the one section in Final Rule, and I can't remember the exact words, well, if you think your FMOs are so great, pay them yourselves. Right? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, we just put together over the last couple of years and a whole technology platform and invested millions and millions of dollars so that agents could do their job more effectively. Like, do they not understand that the agents are thirsting for knowledge to be better proponents for their clients? They're not going to unless you tell them what your clients say. Unless you're the ones that send the letter that say, I had a rewarding trip today. I got to go out and take Mrs. So and so to the hospital because she doesn't have a child in the area. That's what you need to do. And I can't say it enough. And you have AI now, you can just feed in what you want it to say. Like
Well,
if you have
yeah.
a story.
Yeah, we'll see what AI does. I mean, I mean, Andrew, are you gonna check the license and appoint a system, an AI system? No?
I hope not.
So what's going on with the carriers? I mean, advocacy certainly within the agent community. What do you think about? What keeps you up at night? What are you guys focused on? Making sure that you have a job, right? So
Yeah, no. Our first love is the agent. Talking about first loves, right? Yeah. So our first love is the agent. So you need to know as much as agents are out there lobbying, carriers are in DC lobbying as well, because we don't want to see the agent presence go away. If all we needed was a website, then agents would be gone years ago, right? People just log on our website and enroll themselves.
sounds
Most-
awesome. They do.
No, they don't. That's the
No.
reality of it. So the most valuable asset to the carrier right now is the agent. You guys are our clients. I understand you have members, you have clients, but you are our clients. So whatever we can do to better your life and make your life easier, we're backing you with billions of dollars because you're the most valuable asset to us. We need you.
You know, if I could add, there's a role for carriers here. So you think about it currently, if let's say you sold a high deductible G and your biggest fear is now the client comes down with an illness and now they blame you and they've got a lot of claims um, but there are 3 carriers out there today that have a conversion privilege from a high deductible G. That's Physicians Mutual, right? Federal Life, and also United American or Globe. So for carriers, I think they need to start getting a little more creative. The same thing with a Plan N or high deductible G. If an agent sells that, obviously the consumer's self-insuring a little more. So why have the same guarantee issue commission when the consumer is making a choice that perhaps would be not hurt the morbidity that we're facing? Another observation I'd make is when's the last time you saw a new carrier enter our market for Medicare supplement? It's been a while, right? The reinsurers are staying away. The morbidity is too high. Now, you would expect that the post-pandemic overutilization at some point would drop down, right? And we're around 3 years. So my guess is perhaps by the end of this year, I'm not an actuary. I can't really predict the future on morbidity, but I would assume that we're going to see a balancing out of claims experience. And with that, there will be more, you'll start to see perhaps carriers getting into the market and having more choice than what you have today. So I wouldn't want you to be too sour on the future of Medicare supplement. There's always cycles, and we're going through a cycle. And so just provide good advice. I really like what Danielle said is she prepares the clients that they are going to face rate increases. Instead of avoiding the issue, they take it head on. And so for you as an agent, there's things that you can do. For the carrier, there's things that they can do. But it should be a really strong industry. We just have to be a little more creative in what we do.
I do think we'll keep seeing Medigap continue, because I know at my agency, we've had to work really hard in leadership to just barely move the needle in the direction of Medicare Advantage. My team, they love Medigap. They believe in that product. So
Yeah, it seems
getting
like
from an
people
agent,
that love it, love it.
they love it. And the ones that love it, I don't know if you guys ever experienced this, but you could put a video out or a blog post or something, and in the comments, somebody will rip you for saying you only love Medigap. And in the same comments, some will say you obviously are pushing Medicare Advantage. When in fact, a lot of the clients come in knowing already what they want. They've done some of their research, and it's a surprising number of people that want the Medigap plan. So if you have somebody coming in, they wanting Medicare Advantage, don't talk them out of it. Maybe that's the right fit for them. But don't assume that they always want to buy the cheapest thing, because we have people flipping out of Medicare Advantage into Medigap all the time, just to go from an 80-20 mix to 75-25 on Medigap has been really hard for boomer benefits. And that tells me that the interest in the product is still there. It's still strong. And as long as the consumer buys into that comprehensive nature, this product isn't going to go away. It needs some tweaks maybe for the long term. And we have some initiatives going on with that. We'd love for you to get involved.
What would you say to an agent, any of you guys that's only selling Medicare Advantage today?
Honestly, I don't think there's very many agents now that do that. I think most of the agents, it was kind of the opposite. Agents just used to sell Med Sup and started to sell both. But I think that they've really become educated to the fact that one shoe doesn't fit every foot, and they're really doing their work. If you're going to sell a high deductible J or an N, then just like you learn to sell with an MA, put in a hip product, put in a dental vision hearing. You can help prevent any out of pocket that are not expecting. And we used to think that Medicare Advantage was for poor people. Well, to Danielle's point, we have a lot of people that maybe have a lower income and they're really afraid of having a risk that they might incur on an MA, and they're buying the Med Sup and more happy to put that money out and have a fixed cost. So I really think it's just the agents really are the answer. You're educated, you're seeing the client, you're helping them buy the right purchase for themselves.
If I could add one thing is Senator Wyden's report that was issued a little over a week ago stated that agents should be fiduciaries for their clients. Now, that sounds good, right? But and on the wealth side of our industry, they've been facing that for a good long time. But when you start tearing that apart, what does that mean? That you've educated the client on their options and you've put them in the plan that was the right plan for them and you've documented it. And that if you haven't performed that duty, you could be fined and arrested, right? It's pretty serious. So when you start thinking about operating as a fiduciary, you start thinking a little different. It's not just, this is what I do, but rather, what do you need? And you just start thinking of the client, not what plan pays me the most, what plan has the least amount of certification, or which carriers I chose to only do a few. It's, are you really operating in the best interest of the client? And we can learn from the wealth side of our industry what they've had to do to adapt to that, the documentation that's required. And so it's possible that that could come, is that we need to operate as a fiduciary. Now, many of you believe you already do that. But in our space, there are others that take the shortcuts. And we may not have that as an option in our future.
Well, and in the future, what you're pointing out, somebody may come in and tell us what to do. I mean, what should we be doing? Steve, what should we be doing today to make sure somebody doesn't come in and tell, like, I think of an agent as a trusted advisor, right? I really do. And the service that you guys provide has been, again, I was an agent for 7 years, and it was probably one of the most amazing, times of my career. And just still this day, I am passionate about going on home visits and visiting agencies because that's where it happens. I've been everywhere from, $20 million house to, inner city. But the conversation is pretty much the same. But, why are you passionate about MedSup, Steve? And what other opportunities are there to keep MedSup alive?
Well, you said it. I think being advisors is key. What I loved about this business when I got into it 33 years ago is the passion its agent force had with serving the people's houses. It never was about really which product paid them more. It was about the independent need. And I think that's important. And as we've launched products into the space that's have more of an enrollment type process to it, it can create shortcuts. I'm not saying it does for anybody in this room, but it can. So making the value in this room right here is the ability to advise. And I don't care how good Google is or how good AI is or how good every other search engine you can have out there is, people want to talk to somebody to make sure they're making the right choice. So I think the key to our industry as a whole is the value this room brings to our industry. And as Washington or anybody else sees that, I think that's what they will understand. That's what we can do for Washington. I have one little pet peeve that I want to make sure.
As long as it's not me.
That's a longer discussion, but we have a tendency in this industry to say it's Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement. And I think that creates some of the philosophy in Washington and with lobbyists and everywhere else. It's Medicare Advantage or Medicare. Once you choose your base coverage, which is what has always been guaranteed issue, then you can choose whether you want a HIP, whether you want a critical illness, whatever, whether you want a Medicare supplement to cover deductibles or copays or whatever that is. And I think people sometimes that are not in our business don't understand that. A Medigap plan is a plan that covers deductibles and copays that Medicare doesn't cover. A HIP plan can help you cover deductibles and copays and I think it's important. So, and to Dwayne and Danielle, one of the things I've seen in PDP is years ago when those products launched, it was one thing the government seen up front, or whoever put it together seen up front. If people have to pay for something and they don't need it, they're not going to pay for it unless you penalize them. Okay? There's a 1%, there's a penalty, right? If you don't take a PDP for every year that you're not on it, and because there's a lot of people that don't take medications at that age. So now when you start thinking about other plans like a Medigap policies, to your surcharge comment there, if you have a plan that people don't have to pay for until they get sick, that makes it hard to manage. So I think we've got to continue to think about that. I don't have all the answers, but maybe to your surcharge, you could use the PDP as an example of that.
And then really quick, because we do have some questions down here I'd like to close with, but what else should we be thinking about or doing to solidify or keep MedServ relevant? You think about technology, right? The thing that I always struggled with MedSub is it's so state by state, right? Just getting quoting tools is a challenge, coding in enrollment and stuff, and I know a lot are fighting, but what else should we be expecting, looking for, trying to go and get or implement that makes their life easier, makes the consumer happier and better served, and maybe even helps deal with these regulators and this misinformation. Any thoughts on what else is on the horizon or what we should be looking to? We're doing everything we can do. Is that really what we're saying? So advocate, right? Advocate, fight. Any thoughts on that? I mean, you're a carrier, right? I mean, what do you seeing on the horizon that you're going to continue to fight for to make? I mean, it's easy to do business with. You kind of even mentioned that, right? How can you make it easier to do business with them? Enrollment platforms. What else? What else are you guys thinking about?
Yeah. Technology obviously is at the top of the list because the easier it is to either go into a house or submit an app over the phone. I mean, it wasn't that long ago before you had paper apps, and then you had the transition into being able to do electronic apps over the phone, which is phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal, right? So anything that a carrier can bring to the table, or even an FMO with the technology and the value that you guys are bringing, to make it easier for an agent, obviously a carrier wants to back. For the agents, the things that you're going to have to learn to transition into, think of it this way: 10, 12, 15 years ago, most popular Medigap plan in the nation was what? Plan CRF, right? And then about 10 years ago, you saw the switch. Plan G became more popular, especially when MACRA got passed 2020. Now everyone's pushing Plan G or Plan N, right? That's the future. Well, I'm telling you, the way Medigap is headed is it seems to be headed towards more of a single payer healthcare. The more deductible on the client and the less out of pocket up front on the carrier. And I think that's going to help towards being the savior towards Medigap. Not that Medigap's dying. Like Steve said earlier, is so great. They've bared the same percent of the market since inception, right? And that's not gone down with 12,000 new people a day aging into Medicare. So it's not like it's going down, it's going up. But the way to continue, this is my thoughts, my opinions. The way to continue an innovation with the Medigap is to start looking at it as, how can we compete traditional Medicare to the Medicare Advantage realm? We're not adding extras like the dental and everything, or it's very rare that you find that. We need to find a way to lower premiums, to lower loss ratios, and for sustainability. And you're going to find that in a Plan N, you're going to find that in a high deductible, you're going to find that in a hybrid Plan G.
Thank you, Andrew, because my question fell flat and you saved me. But Steve, I'm surprised you didn't bring up, HI and all these other products too. And thank you, Andrew, because I know you're super passionate about you got to be, and Dwayne's talked about it. We got to get creative. We got to think new.
And that's it. It's another with Medicare Advantage, we've done a great job in presenting deductibles, copays, whatever, doctors, specialists, cancer. We talk about a lot of things, but when you talk about Medicare supplement, nobody wants to talk about anything but a Plan G, because all I got to talk to them about is about a Part B deductible. Be more creative. Ask that client what they're concerned about. You're liable to walk out of there with a high deductible plan and a critical illness robust policy.
Correct.
It's not about what we believe they need. It's about what they have.
You said it.
That's it.
Yeah. So there's some really very specific questions in here about specific types of plans. I would suggest you approach the panel afterwards if you have some specific questions. I just want to call out a couple of things on here. And Dwayne, we just talked about this one yesterday. So what if the phone centers, so what about the phone centers that are all Medicare Advantage? Should the government require them to require offering all options be mentioned? And just the only thing I'm going to say to that is, my personal opinion, we're all in this together. I really am disappointed that everybody wants to blame the call centers. Call centers aren't your problem, guys. That's not your problem. And remember, if they create legislation for call centers, they create legislation for all of us. So just be very careful. They're not going to create legislation for this person and this person and this person and this company, right? So any thoughts on that real quick, Dwayne?
Well, not really.
We're done.
But I had something else to share.
Oh, go right ahead, Dwayne. Close us out.
So, we talk about getting creative. How many of you ask a client that's turning 65, because a lot of you prospect in that market, do you have HSA savings that you're bringing with you to retirement, right? If you're not, and I saw some hands too, yes. But if you're not, that's a really good question to ask, because that may lead right into the conversation about, well, then you could probably afford to self-insure a little bit because you're able to use those premium savings. So
Becoming more and more common, right?
it is. So Plan N or high deductible G become a little more justifiable because you know that they've saved just for their health care coverage, and take advantage of that. But that's a good question to ask, because again, now you're in their shoes. They made a decision years ago, probably forgot about it. They use the card when they go to the pharmacy, but they don't think about it for their insurance. And so just one more thing you could do.
Brian, I'd like to add, I'll be at the NABIP booth for the next 90 minutes. So if anyone is interested in hearing more about getting involved in the ways we talked about today, come and see us. We've got a great booth in the expo hall.
Yeah, I think you guys all have booths in the expo hall. And there was a comment about NABIP. There was a comment about NABIP. NABIP is here. I believe you can stop and join. So thank you for that comment. And thank you to the panel. And thank you for all for joining us. Thank you so much.